I'm Emma, and I bankrolled my brother's wedding, only to uncover mid-vows that my mother forged my name to claim my grandmother's $750,000, 0 cents ring for the bride. But when I didn't hand over my grandmother's $750,000, 0 cents ring to my brother's new bride, my own mother threw garbage at me in front of everyone. They didn't ask why I refused. They only asked me to leave. But they forgot one thing. When you cut someone out, make sure they're not the one holding the receipts. I held proof of their deceit, ready to shatter their perfect lie. The humidity clung to my skin the moment I stepped out of the Uber. Savannah in early fall had that particular weight in the air, heavy with their hidden betrayal. The venue stood tall and gleaming, its grandeur a mask for their fraud. I stood there for a moment, the heels I hadn't worn in over a year digging into the sidewalk, and pulled the invitation from my purse. My fingers traced the embossed lettering again. The Thompson family requests your presence at the union of Elliot and Clara, below that in smaller print, +1 optional, no name, not even mine. I exhaled slow and steady. Their erasure cut deeper, knowing they'd forged my name. Inside, the air conditioning hit me like a wall. The marble lobby glistened. A young man in a black vest approached with a polite but confused smile. Hi there. Catering staff is setting up through the service entrance. I blinked. I'm here as a guest. He collared slightly, his eyes flicking to the envelope in my hand. Oh, my apologies. Let me this way, ma'am. I followed him through an archway and into the ballroom. Rows of tables shimmered with glassware and golden cutlery. I scanned the place cards. None had my name. He gestured toward a smaller table in the back, already half filled with older guests I didn't recognize. I gave him a nod and took my seat quietly, adjusting the hem of my dress and pretending I didn't just mistaken for hired help. It had been months since I'd seen my family. Months since a phone call, a check-in, "How are you, Emma?" Even the save the date had come late, and only after I texted Elliot asking if the rumors were true. Still, I came. I wasn't sure why. I thought confronting their lies might force them to face me. Maybe this would be the day my mother looked at me without that constant undercurrent of critique. Maybe Elliot knew I'd found the forged signature and would beg forgiveness. Maybe just being present would be enough. The lights dimmed, conversations quieted. A hush fell over the crowd as a giant projector screen lowered from the ceiling. Then the slideshow began. Clara as a toddler throwing leaves in the air, Elliot in a Halloween costume years before puberty softened his jawline. The two of them together at the lake, at prom, on family trips. I sat up a little straighter. There had to be something, some photo of the years I was there, the vacations I paid for, the birthdays I planned when Mom didn't feel up to it. But as the images kept rolling, frame after frame of carefully curated joy, I wasn't in a single one, not even the group photo from Dad's retirement party. I remembered standing at the end holding the dog, knowing they'd erased me to hide their theft. But in the version they used, the crop cut me off. Guests around me cooped, laughed, applauded. I clapped too, softly, automatically, but my eyes stayed fixed on the screen, waiting for something that never came. It wasn't that they had forgotten me. It was that they'd erased me. Elliot brushed past a moment later, his cologne light but familiar. Glad you made it, he said without stopping, giving me a light pat on the shoulder as if I were a stranger he feared confronting. I stared after him. You too, I said, but he was already halfway across the room. I sat back, inhaling slowly. My hand reached into my purse, feeling for the small velvet box I'd kept hidden since arriving. The ring inside had belonged to our grandmother, a single, deep-set diamond surrounded by tiny sapphires, simple, beautiful, and heavy with expectation. I'd been with Gran the day she collapsed at the garden center. I was the one who wrote in the ambulance, held her hand, signed the hospital forms. In the weeks before she passed, she'd whispered in a voice barely above air, "Don't give it to someone who wouldn't know what it cost to earn it." And yet, here I was at a wedding where I wasn't named, seated in the shadows, holding the very ring my mother now expected me to gift to her new favorite. I opened the box briefly, letting the diamond catch the light. Then, with a soft click, I shut it again. My spine straightened, my jaw set. Across the ballroom, I saw her, my mother. She had just entered through the main archway, flanked by two distant cousins, her laughter a cover for her crime. Then her eyes found me. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She looked at me like I was a stain on the carpet. And then she turned away, already mid-laugh with someone else, like I'd never existed. Her dismissal fueled my resolve to expose her. I stood for a moment, unsure if I'd imagined the look on her face. The band was tuning up, servers weaving through guests with trays of shrimp skewers and wine flutes. I made my way toward the bar, needing something, anything, to steady my hands. "Excuse me, ma'am." "Your mother asked if you could join her in the bridal lounge." I blinked. "She did?" He nodded, professional and distant. "She's waiting just off the east hallway, past the restrooms, first door on the left." I thanked him quietly, though the words barely left my throat. My chest tightened mid something between dread and curiosity. For years, she hadn't asked to see me, not for birthdays, not when I moved, not when I lost my consulting job and quietly rebuilt everything from scratch. But now, on this curated, polished, scheming day, she summoned me. The hallway was quieter, the sound of jazz and chatter muffled behind double doors. I found the lounge easily. The sign on the frosted glass read, "Badal party only." I pushed the door gently. Inside, soft lighting glowed against blush-toned wallpaper. Lillian sat, a viper coiled in silk, ready to strike. And there she was, Lillian, my mother, perched, regal, legs crossed at the ankle like a practiced pose. Her pearl earrings caught the light. "Caroline," she said with that tight smile that masked her desperation to secure the ring. "You came." I nodded. "You asked for me." She motioned toward a nearby chair. "Sit, sweetheart. Let's not turn this into a scene." I stayed standing. She didn't flinch. Her gaze dropped to my purse. "You have the ring with you, don't you?" I went still. We had never spoken about the ring, not once since Grandma passed. I hadn't told her I'd kept it. The only person who knew was Elliot. My throat tightened, but I didn't move. "Why are you asking?" She placed the champagne down. "Because today is about family, about the next chapter. Clara is our beginning Emma. She's who carries us forward." "That ring belonged to Grandma," I said quietly. "She wanted it to go to someone who understood legacy, responsibility." My hand reached for the purse in reflex, closing around the velvet box like instinct. It was cold in my palm. "You don't even wear it," Lillian continued, her voice sliding into that familiar tone, demanding I surrender to her forgery. "What do you need it for? You've made your choice. You keep to yourself. You drift. You always have." I met her eyes. She leaned forward slightly. "This is a chance to prove you're still part of us, that you want to be part of us." I stood there a beat too long, then slowly opened the box. I held it out in the light between us. For a moment, I saw the same reflection I had when I was 19, standing in Lillian's mirror in a hand-me-down dress that never fit quite right. I shut the box with a soft snap. "No," I said. "No theatrics, no anger, just that one word." Lillian's lips pressed into a line. "You would let jealousy poison today?" "I would let respect guide it," I replied. "Steady now. And if that makes me the villain in your story, so be it." She rose quickly, adjusting her shawl like the motion could restore her pride. "You're making a mistake." I turned to the door. "Not the first. Probably not the last, but this one at least is mine." I left before she could answer. Back in the ballroom, the mood hadn't changed. Guests danced and toasted, cameras flashed, waiters refilled half-empty glasses. I walked through it all like a ghost, shoulders squared, face composed. The forged papers in my purse were a ticking bomb. Elliot stood near the DJ table, whispering something to Clara. He looked up as I passed. No nod, no acknowledgement. He turned away before I could meet his eyes. I found an empty chair near the back, tucked behind a column far from the spotlight. I sat slowly, the velvet box still resting in my hand. Then, without warning, the slideshow restarted. The same photos, the same cheers, the same omissions. Not a single image of me. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was invisible again, and that hurt more than rage ever could. The weight of their lies pressed. But I was ready to strike. I sat with my back straight, palms resting on my knees. But inside, I could feel that familiar flicker, like the slow burn of something buried too long. It didn't ask for attention. It didn't scream. It just stayed. From my seat, I watched Clara dance beneath the string lights, her elegance a facade built on my ruin. Her applause followed her every move like she'd been born for this moment. And just like that, a memory pressed its way in, uninvited but sharp. It was almost a decade ago. I'd just closed my first major deal, one that pulled my firm out of red, and secured 20 jobs. I wasn't married. I wasn't even dating anyone seriously. But Grandma had called me to her kitchen and handed me a small box wrapped in faded gold ribbon. "It isn't for a bride," she'd said. "It's for a woman who survives with dignity." Her voice, strong with truth, urged me to fight now. Had been so clear in that kitchen. It echoed again now, even louder than the DJ. I shifted in my seat, the weight of that ring like a stone in my purse. I glanced around the room and no one met my eyes, not even by accident. Near the gift table, a few women were chatting in soft, scheming tones. One of them, a bridesmaid in a blush dress too tight for polite movement, leaned in. "That ring would have made the look perfect," she murmured. Another chimed in. But Emma's always been complicated. The way she said my name, like it was a burden, ignited my resolve to expose them. I didn't turn. I didn't react. But I curled my fingers around the stem of my glass a little too tightly. Complicated. That word had followed me my whole life. It was what my mother told teachers when I asked too many questions. What Elliot used when he didn't want to invite me to family brunches. What everyone seemed to settle on when they couldn't find a way to frame me into the life they wanted. I rose quietly, setting the glass down untouched. Outside, the humidity had softened into something tolerable. I stepped onto the side patio, letting the sounds of clinking glasses and soft music fall behind the glass doors. I thought I'd be alone out there. But then I heard it. "She's just the checkbook," Clara's voice said, sharp with malice, plotting my downfall. "No emotional ROI. They laughed. Not loud, not rowdy, just a soft, closed circle laugh. A cruel jab, but I held the key to their ruin, and Elliot, he stood there, right there, not joining in, not smiling, but not stopping it either. He saw me. He looked me in the eye, and still he said nothing. I didn't stay to hear more. I didn't flinch or storm or ask for an apology. I walked away. Not quickly, not dramatically, just away. Back inside, I found a corner table near the coat check. Their words couldn't reach me. I had the truth. I pulled out my phone, opened the email app, and stared at the blinking cursor. I typed to billing@southernbloomevents.com. Subject payment structure clarification from Etha's financial sponsor. "Hi, please confirm the breakdown of the charges assigned to this event. I'd like to revisit which portions were agreed upon as finalized by the contract holder myself, and which remain pending." I didn't send it. Not yet. I just let it sit there in my outbox. A quiet possibility. A line drawn not with rage, but with intention. This email could unravel their entire charade. The draft sat in my outbox like a match resting near gasoline. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. I felt patient. But patience, I would soon learn, has an expiration date, especially when betrayal doesn't stop at words. I had stepped away from the reception crowd, found a bit of quiet beneath the pergola lined with ivy and soft bulbs. The autumn evening had settled into a warm hush, the air thick with coming justice. I needed air, not because I was overwhelmed, but because I needed space to hold all the words I wasn't saying. That's when I heard the footsteps behind me, familiar in rhythm and in the lack of urgency. "Emma," Elliot called out, his voice shaky, fearing my discovery. "Why are you making this about you? Today's not the day." He stopped a few feet away, just out of arm's reach, arms crossed, face pinched. I turned slowly, met his eyes without blinking. I gave her a gift, I said steadily. I just didn't give her mine. His mouth twitched into something between a smirk and a scoff. You always think your money makes you important. I should have been used to it by now, that tone, that deflection. He knew I'd found the forgery, and it terrified him. I exhaled evenly, more tired than hurt. You didn't seem to mind it when I paid off your college debt, I said, folding my arms. His whole face stiffened. Not embarrassment, just rage dressed up as righteous indignation. You're still keeping score. That's why nobody wants you around. You're transactional. You act like doing something nice means people owe you forever. I opened my mouth to answer, but before I opened, a voice cut through the tension. Low, surprised, and close. Wait, what? You paid his tuition? We both turned. It was Nathan, distant cousin on our mother's side. Tall, tan, his shock revealing he sensed a deeper secret. His tone wasn't mocking. He sounded genuinely blindsided. I didn't respond, but Elliot did. That's none of your business, he said, sharp now, jaw clenched. Oh, I think it is, Nathan replied, stepping closer, knowing there was more to uncover. People should know who really built this family legacy. Everyone's always bragging about. My brother turned to him, fists balled. You don't know the whole story. Then fill me in, Nathan said, voice cool, because from what I'm hearing, it sounds like Emma's been footing the bill while getting treated like a ghost. Elliot looked around, maybe hoping no one else had heard, but they had. A few heads had already turned from the tables inside. The truth was leaking, and he couldn't contain it. The murmur started soft. Just a whisper here, a glance there. She paid for what? Is that true? I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Clara was standing near the cake table, flanked by two bridesmaids. She must have sensed the shift because her smile flickered. She feared I'd expose her role in the fraud. She glanced toward us, her composure cracking under scrutiny. Elliot's shoulders dropped just enough to show the weight starting to land. He turned back to me, his voice lower this time. Why would you do this here? I didn't, I said. You did. I stepped away then, not rushed, not shaken, just done with it for the night. I walked down a gravel path that curved toward the edge of the garden, where the hydrangeas leaned against the wooden fence, the silence sharpening my plan. From there, the party was still visible, still glittering, but muffled, distant. I let the wind move across my arms, fueling my resolve to end their lies. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel angry anymore either, just hollowed out. They've always said I was too quiet, I whispered to no one. But sometimes silence makes the loudest impact. And silence, as it turns out, has a way of echoing through people's pride louder than any scream. Their deception was unraveling, and I held the thread. I lingered by the garden gate a few minutes longer, plotting my next strike. The voices behind me, the quiet chatter, the forced laughter, faded as I prepared to act. I needed to move. I needed to be seen. And not in the way they'd allowed me so far as an extra, a footnote, an optional guest. By the time I returned to the reception hall, the lights had dimmed slightly, the tension electric with anticipation. Music hummed softly. I walked past the main tables, scanning for my seat again, not because I didn't remember where I was, but because a small part of me hoped maybe someone had corrected it. Maybe someone had realized no such luck. I found my chair near the catering exit, tucked between a potted fuse and the swinging kitchen door. The place card still read, "See guest." It wasn't even a real placeholder. It looked like it had been printed as an afterthought. Ink faded, card bent. I sat down slowly, careful not to let my dress catch on the rough edge of the chair. At my table were 4 people. 2 of them I recognized vaguely from some distant family gathering, maybe 12 years back. The other 2 were complete strangers. A couple dressed in muted tones, murmuring, blind to the storm I'd unleash. No Elliot, no Lillian, not even one of the aunts who used to braid my hair at Thanksgiving. I folded my napkin across my lap, willing my hands to stay calm, even though every part of me wanted to crumple that pathetic place card and walk straight out the double doors. A woman at the far end of the table leaned in toward her companion, voice low but not low enough. "She's the one who causes tension," she said, unaware I held their secrets. "That's why they didn't assign her a real spot." Her friend nodded, ignorant of the truth I carried. "She's never really belonged in this family, just floats around. No money, but no presence." I didn't look at them, didn't flinch. My hand simply tightened around my fork until the metal pressed firm against my palm, and in my throat, a lump formed. Not sorrow, not rage, but the certainty of justice. It wasn't the first time I'd heard those words. Not directly, maybe, but in tone, in omission, in space left where a name should have been. I closed my eyes, and for a moment I wasn't at the wedding. I was 19 again, standing under a cheap plastic banner that hung above the driveway of our family home. It read, "Congratulations, Elliot Thompson, class of 2004. I'd just graduated the same morning, honors, a scholarship, but no banner for me." When I'd asked Mom quietly, carefully, why she hadn't included my name, she'd just smiled like she always did when she didn't want to deal with me. "You'll have other moments," she said, waving me off. "Let your brother have this one." But the other moments never came. There was always someone else with the moment, always someone who deserved it more. Opened my eyes and looked back at the women at my table. They weren't watching me anymore. They'd already moved on to dissecting someone else's dress or marriage or plate choice. I nearly stood, nearly walked straight to the valet without a word. But then something caught my eye. Across the room, near the far side of the gift table, stood Clara. She was speaking to a girl, young, maybe 15, one of Elliot's step-nieces. The girl's dress had a slight crease in the bodice, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Apparently, I watched as Clara's expression shifted from strained to sharp. She muttered something to the girl. The child flinched, then nodded quickly, backing away like a scolded employee. She retreated to a nearby chair, shoulders curling inward. That look on her face, I knew it. I'd worn it myself too many times. At school plays when no one clapped, at family dinners where no one asked about my day, on birthdays when the phone stayed silent. And something inside me finally tilted, not broke, not snapped, shifted. I stood, slow and purposeful, letting the napkin fall to the floor beside my chair. I walked past the dessert table, past the bridesmaids posing for selfies. I stopped at the bar where the event planner, Sarah, I think her name was checking a clipboard behind the counter. She looked up, blinking as she registered my face. "I just wanted to let you know," I said calmly, not raising my voice. "You'll be receiving an updated contact for all payment approvals within the hour." She tilted her head. "Okay, should I?" "No need," I interrupted gently. "Just note it for your records." She nodded, sensing a shift but not its depth. I offered a tight smile before turning away. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. A courtesy, really. As I walked back through the crowd, no one stopped me. Their ignorance stoked my determination. I made my way back to my quiet little corner of the room. Sat down with my back straight, eyes forward. If they weren't listening when I cried, maybe they'll hear me now when I whisper with receipts. But what came next wasn't a whisper. It was a slap, dressed as celebration. The music dimmed gradually, the room bracing for impact. Voices hushed as the MC stepped forward and tapped the microphone, his voice sharp with unease. "It's time," he said. "For the toast from our beloved mother of the groom." I stayed seated, fingers interlaced tightly on my lap as Lillian approached the head table. Her dress shimmered under the lights, a glittering lie of innocence. She looked regal, smug, like she was already standing on a pedestal no one dared question. She raised her glass beside Clara, who was glowing with stolen grace. Lillian's voice rang out smooth and sweet, a performance to mask her guilt. "To Clara," she began, "the perfect daughter we always prayed for." Some guests clapped softly. A few glanced at me. Most didn't bother. "She brings balance to our family," Lillian continued, eyes gleaming. "A kind of grace of stability we've long lacked." There it was. the compliment with a blade hidden in its folds. A few heads turned again, their glances complicit in her deceit. I held my gaze on the tablecloth, jaw locked, breath steady. I didn't need a microphone to know where I stood. Or didn't. When the toast ended, the room filled with polite clinks of glass. Waitstaff slipped between tables with trays of champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres. I stood slowly, intending to head toward the garden, maybe even the parking lot. I'd had enough of their charade. I didn't owe them another moment of presence, but I hadn't even cleared the hallway before I heard her voice again. "Caroline," Lillian called from behind just as I reached the corridor by the gift table. I turned. She was holding a small decorative bag, filled with her venom. Without warning, she tossed it at me. It hit my chest and fell, open onto the marble floor. Out tumbled crumpled napkins, half-eaten cake, and a note card scrawled in thick black ink. "Recycle yourself." The air left my lungs for half a second. "What is this?" I asked, my voice flat. Lillian stepped closer, her cruelty barely veiled. "A message," she said, lips curling. "You're a disgrace, Emma." "Always have been. Always making everything about you." I bent down and picked up the card. My fingers didn't shake, but my heart did. "You weren't invited to be seen," she continued. "You were tolerated because we're decent people, more than you deserve." Someone gasped. "Not me," a guest nor. He just walked out of the ballroom behind Lillian, his silence damning. Elliot opened his mouth but said nothing. Clara appeared at his elbow, silent, unmoved. I straightened. "You really don't know how to stop, do you?" I said softly, holding the card between two fingers like it was a dead leaf. Lillian stepped forward again. Time her palm pressed lightly against my shoulder and shoved. Not enough to fall, just enough to stumble. I hit the wall behind me with a quiet thud, phones raised, capturing her downfall. And still, I didn't raise my voice. But I did raise my hand. I held up the card, turned to a member of the catering team frozen nearby and said calmly, "Could you please get the venue manager? I'd like to revoke all financial guarantees effective immediately." The caterer blinked, then nodded and slipped away. Lillian's jaw dropped open, her scheme collapsing in real time. Elliot muttered, "What are you doing?" "I'm doing what I should have done years ago," I said. Paying for silence was never part of the deal. Phones were out now. Some guests were recording, others just watched wide-eyed. I adjusted my purse strap over my shoulder and walked toward the exit. Not quickly, not dramatically, just enough to be remembered. And behind me, the glass of someone's champagne fluted, slipped, and shattered on the tile floor. The real cleanup hadn't started. But now the garbage had a name. And it wasn't mine. But trash always fights back when it realizes it's being taken out. I stepped into the night, the heavy ballroom doors shutting behind me like the final click of a vault. The cool air hit my face, carrying my triumph. No one chased me. Their silence was my victory. I walked to my car at the edge of the parking lot. It was parked beneath a crooked streetlight, flickering like vulturing lies. I sat behind the wheel but didn't turn the key. I held the forged papers, my weapon against their betrayal. The ring was still in my purse, heavy in a way no diamond ever should be. My phone buzzed. I blinked and glanced down. New email. FWD. Immediate payment concerns, contact shift. I opened it, expecting nothing important. But the moment I read the subject line, I sat up straighter. The message had been forwarded by the venue manager. Lillian had emailed them 3 hours ago, long before she threw garbage at me. "Please redirect all future payments and invoicing to the Thompson Family Trust, authorized by the bride." My pulse went tight in my chest. So that was their plan. They weren't just trying to humiliate me in public. They were attempting to cut me out on paper, too, rewriting the facts before the party had even started. Not spontaneous, planned. I pulled my laptop from the back seat, opened a hotspot, and logged into my business account. There it was, drafted last week, waiting. Subject: sole benefactor. Statement of record attached was a full financial audit with dates, payment schedules, transfer receipts. Every dollar had come from me. The Thompson Family Trust hadn't had a cent since Elliot pulled from it for his second home. I'd covered every vendor quietly, consistently, with meticulous precision. I hit send. Recipients, the venue, the caterer, the florists, the photographer, and most satisfactorily, the family's longtime attorney, Robert Langston, who'd once seen my strength. I closed the laptop, exhaled, let the silence fill the car again. Morning came. While I sipped weak coffee in my kitchen, still wearing the blouse from the night before, my phone lit up again, this time with texts, screenshots, notifications. The venue manager had replied to Lillian, "As of this morning, we have been advised the previous account holder is no longer willing to fund this event. Until payment details are resolved, services will be paused." The ripple effect started immediately. Florists pulled their remaining arrangements, vendors walked out, refusing to serve deceivers. The caterer's team stopped prepping leftovers for delivery. The champagne service shut down. Staff stood firm, rejecting her lies. One staff member, according to a forwarded message, told Lillian directly, "We don't serve people who humiliate their patrons." Apparently, they'd seen the footage because, yes, there was footage. Someone had filmed the scene outside the corridor. Lillian tossing the bag, the card that read, "Recycle yourself," and my calm, quiet command to revoke funding. By 10 o'clock, IMME was on Instagram. By noon, the hashtag had begun trending, "I'm a recycle yourself." My inbox flooded. Some messages were cruel, "You ruined your brother's wedding," or "You're bitter and jealous," but far more came from people I didn't know. I've been her. I was always the one funding holidays, but still not welcome at the table. You stood up without screaming. That's strength, thank you. I sat at my dining table, scrolling through it all, heart heavy with their stories. Not triumph. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't trying to be noticed. I was being seen. When silence speaks truth, the whole room listens, even the ones who used to pretend you weren't there. But before the truth could settle, she tried one last time to rewrite the ending. The morning after the collapse, I was nursing a quiet cup of black tea when the next blow landed, not from someone brave enough to call, but from a PR agency's email header. Subject: press statement clarifying events regarding the Thompson wedding. I opened it, scanned a carefully worded release sent to media outlets, posted to family social pages, claiming the wedding had been a celebration funded by a multi-generational trust that certain estranged relatives attempted to disrupt the joy out of personal bitterness, did with a flourish on behalf of the Thompson legacy. Legacy. Funny how they used that word like it meant something earned, not stolen from my sacrifices. I closed the laptop, grabbed my keys, and left. By late morning, I was turning into the long gravel drive of the family estate. Its opulence hid their moral decay. Lillian was on the back terrace, wrapped in silk, her poise a fragile act, her legs crossed just so, sipping tea like a queen unmoved by scandal. She didn't look up when I stepped out of the car, just swirled her teaspoon and said, "Did you enjoy your little scene?" I didn't answer. I walked to the table, set a manila envelope down, and took the seat opposite her. "You didn't need to come all this way," she said coldly. "Whatever lies you've put out, people will forget in a week. Class always wins." "You're right," I replied. "But truth keeps the receipts." She hesitated, then opened the envelope. The top document, a spreadsheet of every wedding vendor's invoice, caterer, venue, florist, even the bathroom attendants. Behind that, copies of bank transfers from my business account. Then, a notarized declaration signed weeks ago stating that I alone bore financial responsibility for the event. And last, a letter from the florist, dated, stamped, declaring Lillian's attempt to switch billing authorization after all arrangements had been finalized. As she flipped through the pages, the silence thickened. Then a new sound. Footsteps. Elliot. He stepped onto the terrace behind her, holding his phone. "I got the email," he said, voice low. "I thought it was fake." Lillian turned sharply. "Elliot, sweetheart, you used me," he cut in. "You lied again." She stood abruptly, hand reaching toward him. He stepped back. "You said she was trying to ruin us. You didn't say it was her money. All of it. I was protecting the family. No, he said, voice cracking. You were protecting your version of it. Then he pulled the house keys from his pocket, dropped them on the table beside the envelope, and walked away. Neither of us called after him. I sat still, waited. Lillian's hands trembled slightly as she smoothed the edge of her silk robe. Her face was frozen in something between rage and collapse. You always said I didn't belong in this family, I told her. Now you're finally right, and thank God for it. I reached into my purse and pulled out the ring. The same one she'd demanded. The same one she'd tried to take through guilt, manipulation, shame. I looked at it for a long second, then slid it across the glass table. You wanted it so badly, I said. Keep it. It's worthless in the wrong hands. She picked it up, fingers shaking. You think this makes you better? I stood. No, I said steady. It just proves you never were. I turned and walked toward the front door. Didn't slam it. Didn't rush. I let it close behind me slowly, each creak a testament to her defeat. And still, even in the quiet that followed, not a single apology ever came. My new home was small. 2 bedrooms, ivory walls, a porch for a rocking chair and herbs. All mine. From pine floors to the kitchen window catching afternoon light. I was placing the last book on the last shelf. When I stopped, a wind chime clinked nearby, a faint echo of peace. It wasn't much, this life, but it was mine. Entirely mine. No performance, no manipulation, no seating charts. I reached into one of the last remaining folders to file some documents, and out slipped an envelope. Cream cardstock, thick gold-trimmed edges. I knew exactly what it was before I turned it over. The wedding invitation, the one that had read, +1 optional. That same phrasing I couldn't unsee no matter how I'd tried to rationalize it. I held it between my fingers, thought about throwing it away. Instead, I slid it between the pages of my grandmother's journal, the one where she'd written, "Dig permission to stand tall." A reminder, not of pain, but of distance traveled. Elliot had texted once. Sorry it turned out like that. 7 words, not a word more. I didn't reply. What was there to say? Lillian stayed silent. Not even a fake olive branch. And Clara? She was busy online trying to drown out the noise. The video of her laughing while I was shoved had gone viral. The hashtag lingered, a scar I didn't fuel. I didn't push it. Some truths speak louder when you stop trying to prove them. A few Saturdays later, I hosted something quiet. No silver napkins, no hired musicians, just a simple table set under soft string lights in my backyard. Food made by my own hands, 8 guests. The florist who'd refused to change the invoices. The planner who'd called me the next morning to say, I should have stepped in sooner, I'm sorry. Nathan, who had shown up with his sleeves rolled in a bottle of wine. My assistant, who had worked behind the scenes to keep my world spinning. And the teenage girl, Elliot's wife's niece, who now sat beside me in jeans, smiling like she finally belonged somewhere. They brought laughter and stories, and most of all, peace. When dessert came around, someone passed me a small white card tucked beside the pie plate. I opened it. You're not a +1. You were always the everything. I let the laugh out before I could catch it. A quiet release from years of silence. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. They saw me. Not because I'd earned a title, but because I'd stopped asking for one. Later that night, as I washed the last dish and wiped down the counter, I looked out the window again. The wind chime was still swinging, the stars hid behind clouds, like my petrol but fragile. I thought to myself, you don't need a seat at their table to prove your worth. Sometimes you just build a better one and invite people who know how to sit with respect. But their betrayal left scars, a reminder that truth wins, yet healing is slow.